Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the almost daily ZenCast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and good night to you. And welcome back to Good Morning Trumptopia, returning after a prolonged hiatus. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, and we have come full circle, friends. MAGA has completed its transformation from the absurd claim that it's working hard to make America great again into its true form that mucking about will get you arrested. I wish I had come up with that myself, but I saw it in a photo of a lawn sign. MAGA, muck about and get arrested. Listen, I'm not one for I told you so's because they're not particularly productive. But back in 2016/2017, I was one of many people vocalizing my concerns in real time about this New York pretend billionaire / obvious con man that has a 30-year track record of criminality. I said, in real time, this guy is playing that bass. This guy is lying. This guy is going to get himself in trouble. Now, I'm not one for predictions, and I'm definitely not one for patting myself on the back about things I did not say. And please note, most conspiracy theory content out there is explicitly about that. It's like, here, repost this content that you haven't verified that was delivered to you by corporate algorithms, and then congratulate yourself and pat yourself on the back for being quote-unquote right when we tell you to. We've just watched the first former president of the United States go through due process. Mind you, he had some leniency that was ridiculous. Any other person, you, me, or whoever, any member of his base, had gotten into the kind of legal trouble that Trump is now, they would be in jail already. They wouldn't be gallivanting about the country, holding million-dollar fundraisers, hobnobbing with white nationalists, golfing, and bad-mouthing the judicial system. Now, I'm not a blind faith, boot-licking supporter of any system. I'm also not a completely irrational spewer of nonsense accusations. All systems are corrupt. Please see my previous comments in other episodes about how to actually solve that. It's a pin on the corkboard. But here, for those of you who are really new, let me just let you in on the bottom line about systems. Okay? Where do systems, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, whatever, any kind of system, the military-industrial complex, our consumer-based capitalist economy, where do they come from, these systems? They're not of nature. They are not laws of physical reality. They are concepts and ideas that human beings made up. Let me get to one of my central tenets of everything I've ever said on my podcast and any other of my content. You don't need imaginary villains, demons and ghouls and goblins to explain the madness, greed, corruption of the ego, and plain old-fashioned hubris taken in at a collective level are enough to explain everything. We can spend the next 3,000 years tearing down systems and rebuilding them, like we spent the last 10,000 years tearing down systems and rebuilding them. If we don't address the core issue of the corruption that stems from the human species and infects the systems that the human species creates, we're never going to fix any of the problems that we create with the systems that we build. So, will this new turn of events change anything in regards to the general support that Trump continues to enjoy from his core base. Let's talk about that on the other side of a short DJZ Discotheque Synthetica audio asset remix entertainment track for your boogie woogie butt jiggling. Please get up and dance to Simplicity of Funk, a classic DJZ Funky Pop remix live audio asset track for your entertainment. Let's talk more on the other side. That's right, folks. DJ Zed and I produce audio entertainment remix asset traps for you to get down and boogie woogie to, and you can enjoy our previous playlist over on soundcloud.com/Mr. Zeppo. And tune in, sign up, slap those follow buttons, because we're dropping a new list sometime next month with all fresh tracks. Okay. DJ Zed's going to finish out this track, and we're going to wrap up our discussion of the most recent events in Trumptopia. So, the newest headlines I saw getting ready for this episode is that Trump has insinuated, as he always does, that his arrest will be the cause of great turbulation in American society. Political violence solves nothing. This is another one, pin on the corkboard, my friends. I've talked about this on many instances, and I'll talk about it again. Violence, in general, does not solve problems. It might, in genuine cases of actual self-defense, terminate an immediate danger. But that, my friends, categorically, by definition, is not solving the root cause of the problem. If it did, if violence solved problems instead of just ending problematic individual people, we would be problem-free in 2024. 10,000 years worth of endless, bloody violence has gotten us to where we are now. So I beg you, if you've got MAGA family, friends, associates, maybe point that little fact out if you're still engaging in civilized public discourse with them. Will we have another January 6th? That's the question on everyone's mind. It is 60-40 as far as I can tell. I think that a percentage of the Trump base is exhausted, but caught up in the ego identification with the cultural identity of MAGA. Okay, now this touches on an issue that no one likes talking about in regards to their own cultural institutions. But there's a trending meme, there's a question that human beings have pondered forever, I imagine. But what really is a cult? And we have arguments about it. We have experts who study it. We have public opinion about it. We have people running around accusing everybody but their own group of being a cult. And I think, after nearly 50 years of being stuck here on this planet with all y'all, that the big glaring elephant in the room is that the human mind functions in a cult-like manner to begin with, right? Cult is the seminal word to culture. Here's an example that I bring up when people are being contentious and don't want to like self-analyze. It's amazing to me. Like, let's take a very specific example. Because accusing people of being in a cult or being caught up in cult-like thinking is super easy. I mean, in America, half the country accuses the other half of the country of that, and so does the other half back at them. Okay? But let's contemplate. In 2016, the MAGA base was enthusiastically chanting, "Lock her up." And the if we were to speak the silent part out loud, it basically meant, lock her up, we don't care about due process, we don't care about evidence, lock her up. Okay? Now, here we are in 2024, and the entire base is complaining, whining like fragile little snowflakes with too much emotion, which is, you know, they are the F your feelings crowd. The F your feelings crowd certainly has a lot of feelings about how unfair it is that Donald Trump is being investigated, arraigned, charged, prosecuted, put on trial, and ultimately incarcerated. Now, it's still up in the air whether or not he will see jail time, but it's ironic to me that that same crowd will turn around and call me a leftist, demon-loving, indoctrinated, cult member, blind sheeple. The same people that wanted to violate American law. Now, I'm not blindly saying all law is perfect, okay? There is a nuanced discussion to be had about which laws remain valid and which laws are arcane or no longer relevant and which laws are downright biased and unfair. Absolutist statements are rarely absolutely true, and that cuts in every direction. So I'm not going to make blindly positive absolutist statements about any legal system. But I will say, in a very specific, non-absolutist way, this is relative to the individual example, that when someone, let's say, like a former president, brags about committing crimes, like, sexual assault, but then also lies about those crimes, about having the ability to declassify documents with his mind, which is the most patently ridiculous thing any president has ever said about the powers of the office. Point blank, just bottom line, that's the most ridiculous thing. And that any of his supporters didn't go, whoa, what? At that. After the year's worth of totally crazy things. And then we'll turn around and call anybody who dares to question his claims, dares to investigate his actions, dares to compare and contrast his promises versus what he's delivered. Those people are brainwashed sheeple. Now, it's just as easy for any blind faith member of the DNC to almost without any investigation say, oh, they're part of a cult. Here's the breaking news. Human brains build systems of culture, and those systems of culture, whether they are communities, whether they are clubs, whether they are political parties, they function using the same psychological tools as cults. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert. I'm just pointing this out from observation. Okay? We can have a nuanced discussion and debate about whether or not how accurate my observations are. But we're in a moment where we all need to step back. Obviously, Trump is remarkably unfit for office. Biden is no gem of an example of someone that is supremely fit for office either. And of course, it would be amazing if we could identify the flaws and entry points of corruption in both parties and in the broader political system at large, both nationally and internationally, and fix those problems. But we're not going to fix those problems by deciding that my tribe is righteous and that tribe is pure evil. We've been mucking about with that kind of thinking for millennia, and it's gotten us nowhere. Now, back when Trump actually lost the election and everyone was heartbroken and the F Your Feelings crowd were in shambles and having all kinds of emotions and getting riled up, I was advocating for compassion, not anger, not hate, not violence, compassion. Our brothers and sisters who are caught up in blindly supporting this idolatrous, hypocritical, scheming, shilling, scamming, blowhard, they need our support. Here's my controversial hot take. We need to be more Christ-like. And mind you, I'm not a raving lunatic member of the Christian faith, right? And forgive me, those were very judgmental words. But religion, like any other ideological construct, is a mental configuration, and it impacts our ability to think rationally. If we do not recognize what it's doing. There's a difference between what the Christian religions, because there are several, it is not one cohesive monolith of Christianity, and anyone who talks that way does not understand their own faith system, in my humble opinion. Okay? But I think right now, whether you are a member of any version of Christianity or not, regardless of what your actual practicing faith is, I think the challenge that we face now, not in a religious, ideological sense, but in a practical, technical, physical sense, we are being challenged to be more Buddha-like, more Christ-like, more insert your favorite transcendental being who taught compassion and healing and forgiveness here, right now in this moment. If we don't, we will be falling for the ego pit trap that has been keeping us on a treadmill of argumentation and endless fighting and violence for millennia. We must reach deep within and transcend our ideological biases. We must analyze and question everything from our politics to our religious ideology to our social norms, right? Not for the raw chaos of pure disruptive upheaval, but for the purposes of identifying the root causes of our suffering, which are not to be found in the ideas necessarily, although those ideas, those ideological constructs, those mental memes, that is the means by which they are communicated like a disease. That's how ideology spreads. Violence never destroys an ideology unless it completely obliterates the entire population of people who believe in, buy into, and perpetuate that ideology. And thus, any form of ideological warfare, any form of my ideology versus your ideology, is ultimately irrelevant and immoral. We are not here to destroy ourselves and each other. We are not here to identify the worst among us and obliterate them. That path is madness, dear friends, dear human species. An eye for an eye is not a justice system. It is a species-wide act of self-mutilation and self-harm. Our brothers and sisters who are still caught up in the ideological bromance of believing that Donald Trump is the Christ-like figure that he has been mocked up to be, they need genuine, Christ-like, compassionate healing from those around them. That's always been my message, friends. Now, plenty of MAGA supporters who claim to do their own research, quote-unquote, come at me with all kinds of boilerplate, prefabricated, false accusations. Now, I have not been the most consistent, but I have been in real time sharing my thoughts, concerns, and questions about Trump and the Trumptopian movement right here on this podcast since pretty much the earliest days. Since just within weeks after he rode down that supposedly golden escalator in front of that supposedly adoring crowd of hired extras pretending to be fans. And all those false accusations that the trolls and the haters bring at me expose one thing and one thing only, that they didn't really do their research. You want to argue with me? Bring it. But you better do your homework first. And I got 7 years worth of the podcast to back up what I am, what I've said, what I stand for, and to prove that I have not said the claims being made against me. Friends, the human species must always contend with the same fundamental question. Do we continue the status quo and drive the human species down a path of self-annihilation, or do we stop the madness, get off the trolley car, and that is a reference to the trolley car dilemma, and dismantle the tracks? Instead of fretting and fighting and arguing and butchering each other over which option of the trolley car dilemma is the right choice, we can just get out of the trolley car and dismantle the tracks and free the people tied to them. Wild, mind-blowing. So I beg you, friends, as things get crazier, because they probably will, please remember, our calling is to heal ourselves and each other and to transcend our ideological constructs, not dig ourselves deeper into the trench warfare of ideological us versus them engineered wedge issues. And with that, friends, I will bid you a fond farewell. Here's one last little track to ease us out. Where's a nice short one? Octane Techno 101 lightning intro. I guess that should have been an opener, but it's a closer today. Let's hear this out and then a final thought before exiting credit song. Come on by to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. No period between the R and the Z. That's MRZEPPO. And check out all the many dimensions of the Zeppoverse. This podcast is just the flagship central project within a whole multiverse of entertainment content I'm creating and seeking audience for. Friends, we live in a world in which we all contribute to the creation of reality, whether we realize it or not. So let's join together and create a better reality through transcendental healing. It sounds crazy. It sounds like hippie, dippy, new age woo-woo nonsense. But fundamentally, there is a functional trajectory to explore there. Imagine a world where no one buys into nonsense, absurd, false propaganda, because we can transcend ideological honey traps and slippery slopes, etc., etc. Imagine a world where instead of arguing over ideological absolutes, We have consensus-building public discourse about functional, practical, problem-solving political policy. We've thrown out the discussion of policy with the Trumptopian movement. Instead of discussing how to best serve our unhoused population, we're having an ideological debate about whether or not being a homeless individual is a personal moral flaw, which is garbage rationale in a system that is designed to extrapolate wealth from the lower classes and deliver it to the elite. But that's a pin on the corkboard. A whole nother discussion we've touched on several times before, and we will have to come back and address. Again, I thank you, friends. If you are a Trumptopian member of that political, ideological, tribal, mental construct group, and you're listening to this show for the very first time, please forgive me. I'm not here trying to offend you. I'm here to try to shake you up, and have been for 7 years. If you are a member of the coalition of diverse groups of people that are against Trump, I beg you to pause and remember that Trump wants you to hate him as much as he wants his base to blindly adore him and conceive of him as some sort of Christ-like savior. The system wants the two tribal parties to be in constant us versus them ideological wedge issue engineered echo chambers of argumentation. And if you look around, friends, it's clearly been working. We can change all of this, but first we must agree and come to a mutual understanding that violence will not solve it, whether it's rationalized in a way that seems to make sense or not. And we must rally ourselves to unify against those that would organize to perpetuate the dehumanization and targeting of others. I forgot to mute my alerts. The last thing we should do, the thing we must avoid is to become the monster that we think we're fighting. The last thing that we should ever allow as a coalition of diverse and different peoples who are just sick and tired of what Donald Trump and his co-opted political party are doing is become like them. Because that's what the system wants. And with that, friends, I bid you a fond farewell. Go be good human beings to each other at home, in your own mind, and out there in the real world, on the social media platforms, in the gaming lobbies, and in the political public discourse forums. Because if we're not being good human beings to ourselves and each other, WTF? And that's what I gotta say today. Until next time, friends, I've been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily ZenCast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.